So this is another example where we're trying to drive toward a certain thing, but there's a lot of interesting concepts that happen in order to make this work. It doesn't sound like it would be a really difficult thing, but there's a lot of synchronization that has to happen here, and there's a lot of constraining that's going to have to happen here. Things that I've alluded to or may have shown you in little bits and pieces, but now you're going to get a chance to see how it all kind of plays together. What I want to do here is I've got a parent record. So I've got a subject table, and it's got a record, and in it there's a multi-pick category. Okay, there's a multi-pick lookup, and then there's a supplemental relationship, and the record in the supplemental relationship also has the same multi-pick in it, except the values of the multi-pick are going to be constrained to be those that were actually picked in the parent. Kind of an interesting thing. It's something that happens quite frequently, actually. And it turns out it's not the easiest thing to do, but it's not incredibly hard. And once you've done it a few times, you really get to know how to do it. So I'm just going to step you through this is done. First off, let's look at the relationship diagram because something unusual is happening here too. All right. First off, I've got attorneys, and attorneys have clients. Attorneys offer services. Okay, and those services are just a category to the attorney. All right. But clients will request services, same things, but they can only request the ones that the attorney actually has. So it's a little bit different. This, you can think about this as being just like any other category relationship, that multi-pick category that we've done before. It's unconstrained. It just brings back all the values from this thing called TLK star service. But this one will need to bring back just the ones that are associated with attorney, which means that the row source on this is going to be constrained. It's going to have a constraint based on whatever attorney I'm looking at the given time. All right. Now, one thing I need to point out here, when I do this, when I use a category, a lookup table to be form a category to multiple tables, then I don't say the name of the receiving table. That's how I usually do it. So remember this: if this relationship was not here to the client, this would be TLK attorney star service. If it wasn't to the attorney, but it was to the client, it would be TLK, and then I put in parentheses attorney star client, then star service, right? But because I'm going to use it for two different categorizations, or I should say, this the same type of categorization but done different ways, I can actually just say it as if it's a wild card. That this is a thing called service, and it's going to be used in multiple places. Okay, actually, I do this a lot. Things like the states of the United States. Maybe I have something where I have my customers, and I want to put their address in there, and one of the fields is the state they live in, so I have a state one there. But then I may also have suppliers I deal with, and then they have an address, and there's a state there. Well, I can use that same state one there and there. And if I have buildings, I could say what state the buildings are in. I could use that category over and over and over, in other words. So, and that's perfectly allowed. So, but again, here it's not that I'm just using it over and over. I'm using it unconstrained here, but I am going to use it constrained here, and I'll show you how I actually do that. So, let's go to. Let me show you how this actually is going to work. Okay, I've got it working already. I'm going to show you how it works. So here's the attorney, and I don't have a lot in just the name and address, but I do have the services that the attorney provides. If I go then and look at the clients, you'll see a client name, but you see the services that the client wants to engage the attorney in. He gets to pick them, right? And you see, I only have listed here the ones that were actually picked from this list. All right. If I go in here and say let's turn real estate planning on here now, and I go to client, you'll see now estate planning's in that list, and I could select it. Now, conversely, this is one thing that, I may actually have to write a rule in the background to keep this from happening, but I could uncheck that, and then when I go out to client, it's gone. And, whoa, I had something checked there, and it wants to keep that on there. I didn't even know it would do that. Oh, that's only because I'm on that record. As soon as I move off of it, it goes away. That's just showing me that there was something picked there at one time. Boy, that's interesting. I never noticed that before. But probably, again, I would probably write a some kind of error message, and I'll talk about that in a second. Maybe I'll actually do that while I'm here. But anyway, what I want to do is I want to actually, this is just a typical multi-pick. All right, there's nothing fancy about it. I just did a multi-pick based on the values that are over in service. It's got a lookup form, or I can change them and all that stuff, all the fun stuff. All right. Again, what's going to be different is this. Yeah, it's going to be a multi-pick from that one. Just we set it up the same way, but what's going to be different is the row source for this. I'm actually going to constrain it. And what I'm going to constrain this on is a query that actually brings back what those services are that this particular lawyer, in this case Sarah Bleeding Heart, actually has checked as services that they will provide. So how do I do that? Let's go out and look at it in design mode. And again, what's of interest here is the list box here on the clients. So if I go over and look at the row source, like I usually do, okay, usually you would just see service here and then these fields. Okay, now I didn't change these fields at all. They will stay just as they are. There's no additional fields. There is no changes to the expressions in the fields. They stay exactly like they are. What's different here is, though, that I have dropped in here a query that I will link to. And what this query does is only return the services, the primary key value, basically, from that list box, or I'm sorry, from the let's see, yeah, from the services. I'm sorry, from the services lookup table that are associated with whatever the record, whatever attorney record I have up at the time. Now, this is going to get a little complicated, okay, but not overly complicated, okay? You kind of think of this as I'm going to have a parameter query that's going to prompt me for the primary key of the attorney record. And then it's going to go out and find out all the primary keys of all the service records that are associated to that attorney. All right, and that's what it's going to come back with. And then we're going to have that in an interrelationship with the primary key of services. What happens then? This is really going to bring back a subset of this. So when it does, and I've got an inner join, it's only going to bring back the complete records, all these fields of the ones that belong to that attorney. It's kind of a slick way of doing it. So let's go back and, again, I'll explain this a little bit more in a second. But we first want to look at is this query that I wrote in order to isolate the services of the attorney. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and look at this QFM attorney start client dash services. Open it up in design mode so you can see it. All right. And you can see I've got the attorney in here and I've got the services, and there's just an inner join. Okay, which means that if I ran that right now for all attorneys, I would see a list of the attorneys. Well, and of course, whatever fields I put in there. But let's say I put all the fields from the attorney and category and on for that. I would see all the attorneys and then all the services. Okay, so I'd see every permutation of the attorney for each of their services and on and on. But I don't want to have all the attorneys here. I just want the services for a particular attorney. And I only want to really see these values here anyway. Okay, so those values will be taken care of by the other query, the query that this one's going to be in a relationship to. All right, for this, I just want to have a list of the primary key values of the services for the attorney in question. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, basically, I just need to bring back the record identifier from services. That gives me the primary key. But how do I do it for a particular attorney? Well, remember when I did a parameter query where I prompted myself, and I would put a value in, and then that becomes the constrained value. I'm going to do the same thing here except instead of prompting me, I'm going to have it get that from the form that I'm on. All right. I'm going to go to a control called forms, form attorney. So it's that attorney form that I have opened up here. There's a control on there called constar-record identifier. And I actually talked about that once before. If I come back here and I look at this, I'm going to close down my property list so you can see a little bit more. If you look behind the find record control, I've got this one and I even put a label on it that says do not delete. There is a control right here, and I keep it really small, okay, but if I wanted to see the properties for it, I can open it up, and you'll see I named it constar-record identifier. And what that holds is the primary key value for the attorney record, right? This form is bound to the attorney table. So that's going to have the primary key value of the attorney. That's what I want. Okay. Now it turns out I'm using this. This is there already because I actually use that to change the values in my record identifier. In my find record control. As I move from record to record, or I delete a record, or I add a new record, it updates this for me automatically. All right. So I may as well reuse it, right? Since it's there. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use that, okay, so that when that row source for this fires, it's going to fire this because that's in a relationship with one of that's the relationship that it has embedded in it. And then it's going to go look for that value there to get its constrained list. So that's kind of cool. In fact, I can mimic what's going on here. I know that I can mimic by hand what's going on here. I don't have to do it all automated right away. In fact, I'm going to close this down so I don't have it open, just so you can see this, okay? So I've got, this is my QFM, okay? Again, it's referencing that control on the form object, okay? But it's not there right now, all right? If I was to run this, Access doesn't know what to use there for the value. So it'll prompt me. It'll think it's a parameter and it'll prompt me for the value of it. So I'm going to run it right now and you see what it did. It's actually telling me what it's looking for. So I needed a value for this and it's not there, but I could give it to him right now. Okay. I know that Sarah Bleeding Heart is 3. So when I do 3, that's her primary key value. I get 1, 7, 9, and 13 as the primary key values of the services that she has associated with her. Remember, she only had the 4. Okay, and if I look those up right now, I could go into the services table and look them up, and you'll see that 1 is litigation, and 7 is personal property, and 10 is criminal defense, and 13 is social services. Those are the ones she has, right? Close that one down. And if you don't believe me on that, I'll actually run this again so you could see it. She's the first one that comes up because I have them alphabetical here. But you can see corporate law, litigation, personal property, and social services. If I turn one of these off or turn one of these off, make another, turn one that isn't on, you see other records. Okay, so that basically brings back a list of the primary key values associated with each one of these that's turned on. Now, what I want to do is I want to use that to limit the values that are coming back from the other list. And so to do that, again, on the row source for that, I can do, this is the list box that I was just on. On the row source for that, I gotta open up its properties. Boy, it didn't want to open it for me. There you go, properties. I go to row source, I look at that, and again, I've got services like I should have because that's what the multi-pick is, but I'm going to put it into a relationship in the query. Okay, I don't do this back at the relationship window. It wouldn't serve any purpose there, okay? I do it here in the query, okay? And so think about what's going to happen here. When this runs, it'll first run this query, come back with that list, and then put those records into a relationship with these records. And because it's basically the primary key with the primary key, it's only going to return the records where the primary key matches, right? Because this is an inner query. So think about it again. Like I said, this is always going to bring back a subset of whatever's in here. Now, if I had everything picked for her, it would bring back all of them, right? If I had none of them picked here, it would bring back none of them. But if I have some picked, it'll only bring back some those ones that I picked. Plus, it'll bring back the category, description, display order in this. Okay. Are there other ways to do this? You bet. I could have actually made. I didn't necessarily have to have that other query. I could have put a subquery in here as the criteria. I know I haven't done that before. That is usually something I save for the advanced class. But I basically could have taken that SQL code that was over there and put it right down here in the criteria, and it would still do the same thing. Why would I do that? Well, then I don't have the query object out there when I compile it and all that, and it wouldn't be exposed to people through the back end. But usually I'm not too worried about that, about queries doing that kind of stuff. There really isn't anything they could have changed. It's just a select query, so I don't worry about that too much. But yeah, so there are other ways to do what I just did, but this is I think one of the easier ways, and something that is easier for me to maintain if I decide to make some changes later on. So I'm going to save that. Okay. So again, what will happen here now is when I go to the subform and I see the records for whatever attorney's record I have, all right, it lists those ones for that. Now the problem is it only renders that once. Okay, which means for a particular attorney, I would have to come out of this in order to make a change anyway. So when I come back in, it'd be updated. But I haven't shown you how that happens. Okay, you know how the query runs. Okay, and the query runs as soon as the form opens. But what happens after it's open and I start making changes? Somehow I need to be able to requery this. Okay, and there's actually two different ways to do that. But and I'm going to show you each way because they both have their particulars that make sense for using it one way versus another. Okay, so there are two situations here now where I have to actually update the value that's going to be in that list box. So I come back here again. Okay, that just opened the form. It opened it, and when it opened up that list box here, it right away ran that query, the row source query that ran that other query that looked at the value up there that's behind here and got it back, and now limits the list to that. All right. Now, right now, if I could pick and choose all day, and it wouldn't change this unless I actually have taken the effort to say, after this updates, go out and requery this or refresh it. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do here. Okay, when I pick any value here, and I go out here and you see that it did it. When I pick that, it fired its after update property. When I unpick it, it fires its after update property. And it's called the after update event for that control. So when that happens, what I want it to do is I want it to refresh the whole form. Refreshing the parent form will also refresh the subforms. And it'll refresh all the controls that are on each of those forms. So we'll refresh this form, this control then, okay? But only for the record that I'm actually on. All right, that's important. Okay, so let's remember that. Okay, because that's the second thing I'll have to do. But right here, what I'm saying is, if I go to that top level list box, the one in the parent record, open up its property sheet, and I look at its row source. I'm sorry, not row source. It's after update property. You see, I've got an embedded macro in here. There's just one command, run menu command refresh, and that will refresh the form, the parent form. Right? It doesn't just refresh the control I'm on, because that's one of the things that I sometimes get confused on. This refreshes the entire parent form. And when you refresh the parent form, it will also refresh all the controls. And one of the controls that will refresh is the control that's holding the subform for the supplemental table. All right, the records from the supplemental table that belong to this particular parent record, the parent record that I'm on at the time. It'll refresh all that. So, and when it refreshes that subcontrol, it refreshes the subform that's in it, and it'll refresh all the controls in it, including that list box control. So that's a really quick way to take care of everything at one time. Update it for changes in values in the parent record. However, there's another situation, and that's the situation that I actually move onto a new attorney. Okay, so I change my record to a new attorney. All right. So again, remember this one's got for this attorney, and now I move to a new attorney. Now you see those are different. He's only got 2 checked there. I go here and you'll see 2 checked. That I didn't have an after update, and it didn't load with these initially because it loaded with whatever was on the first record, right? Whatever was the first one in the form. So how did this get updated now? Well, I do that by setting the on current event of the record of the subform to requery this. Okay, the subform knows that it's controls, and I can requery any control that's on the subform when I use its on current event. Now, this is one that I get mixed up on all the time because I sometimes will go down here and on the parent and use its on current event. You don't want to do it there. Okay, that's not where on current. The on current event happens in 3 situations. One is you just open the form, and whatever record has the focus in either the parent form or the child form, that the on current applies to them. On current will also happen when you move from record to record. So if I've got 2 records in there, I move, the on current fires, whatever I move to is the current record, right? And third is when I delete a record, now it's going to move it off of the record I was on to something else, whether it's a new one, because it was the record at the end, or somewhere else in the stack of records that I have. That will be the one that the on current record is associated with. All right, it's kind of a weird thing about how this works, but interestingly enough, it is not the on current value for moving from attorney to attorney that causes me to want to update that. It's when I actually bring it up for the first time here, when I click it in the client and it comes up for the first time for the new attorney. That's when I want to requery it. Why? Because before I even open that up, I may add some or take some away. So it'll refresh and all that, and then it'll update then anyway. But I could just go right there, right away, right? And if I go there right away and I haven't done a requery, guess what? I'm going to see the values from the last time it was actually refreshed or requeried, which means I would see values that were not for this attorney, but for the first one that I actually, or the last one, they actually did have a refresh. Okay, I have a student that's trying to use this right now. That's why I did this for this semester, and he said, "Oh, you know what? It works great on the first record, but then I go to the second record and I'm seeing the values I checked for the first one, because it needs to be requeried, and it needs to be requeried from the on current event for this form, for the supplemental table." All right. Now remember, we could get to the properties of the main form and the supplement, the subform at the same time right now. Okay. So if I click down here, you see it says form. Make sure you know what form you're in. You are in the form for attorney right now. Okay. I want to be in the form for attorney client. So when I go here and I open that one up, and I'm clicking right now in this empty space down here. If I go up, you'll see it's still a form, but this is for this one now. Okay. In fact, you can tell which one you're in by going all the way to the top and seeing the name of it. So this is TSP attorney client, right? And I can come down here and now I'm going to open its on current event. And in its on current event, instead, I'm not going to use the refresh. Well, I often wondered maybe I could, but I'm actually going to requery it. So this is showing you how to actually requery a specific control. No, you know what? I do want to do this. I remember because if I refresh it, I could be like on the second or third one, and then it wouldn't refresh the ones that had been picked already. I have to actually requery it, and then it requeries it on the entire record set. It's really interesting how it does that. But anyway, this is how I did this. Requery, and then I just gave it the control name. And the name of the control is CBL, Attorney Client Service. That's actually the name of this control here. If I go up here to the top, you'll see it's CLB turning on. Okay, so it requeries that. So in other words, if I move to a different attorney and then I click Client tab, I should now see it will at that time say, okay, I've got a new current record of exposed here. Change its values to be whatever values it's are based on the new record and the new parent record. I know that's a lot to remember. But if you just follow the steps I did here, okay, the steps were very simply you build your number one, you build your category relation, you build your parent child. This could have been a junction table, by the way. I think it could be a supplement too. It would work too, a supplemental table, okay? But you build your parent-child relationship, okay? And then you build your category relationships. Then you go in and you create your list boxes. Of course, first you set up, you get your FLK and all that. By the way, I should show that. Let me go back there really quick. Uh, the one thing I didn't do here is see I could still get that ghost image and it brings back all of them. So be careful with that because they could change one that's not here, and that would change it everywhere. Don't forget it has referential integrity. Could I have limited these? Yeah, you know what I could have done? I could have made another FLK that uses as its record source basically the same kind of records, the same kind of query that I used on the row source for this, and then it would only have the ones for this one. But you know what? You came this far. This is good enough. Okay. And the other thing is, you don't necessarily have to have it. If you rather that just be managed from the top one, you could always come in here and on. Now I know it's back there on the field in the table, but that was an inherited thing. You'll see it right here. I can actually just take it out right here if I wanted to. Save that, open it up. And now when I go out, you still see it pops up here, no problem. But now when I go here, it doesn't. It doesn't show. So um, something to consider. You may not want to manage it from that place, and that's fine. You don't have to. So I'm going to put it back in here because I want it in here. Hope I'm not messing everything up. Anyway, first step, establish your relationships, your forms, all that stuff. Okay, put your list boxes in here. Again, the list box for the parent form is just like it always is. Come in here and create this for this list box. Then you want to first create this query that's going to limit, going to return the values that have been picked for that particular attorney, or I mean whatever the parent subject is in yours. You only want to bring back the values that were picked from the parents list box. Then you're going to change the record source on this. Jeez, I don't know why that's just not opening. I keep having to go up here and hit property sheet. Usually I just double click it and it opens. Um, and again, what I did is I had to alter that by putting that first query in here and then just setting a relationship between the one column that it has with the auto record identifier, the primary key, and that will now give me that subset with all the other stuff that needs going in. That limits the list of that box. Then I need to, from the parent list box, set a macro that runs the menu command to refresh. And then I go to the client and go on to its subform. So I'm down here in the subform, just clicking somewhere so I can bring up the form properties. And I set its on current event to be a requery of that list box. So I do have to name that list box. So name that list box after you've created it and then refer to it here. That's the list box that's on the client. That's this one right here. And that should do it. You're ready to go. So again, rocking and rolling. I got these. And you can see as I go from attorney to attorney, it changes because they all are different. I should do one where I just make it get rid of them all. And when I get rid of them all, you see there's nothing to pick here. And that's not nice, is it? I think I would set this up number one to make sure that at least one is picked. So how do I do that? I can make this a required field, right? Except the problem is I could get to this before I actually have picked one. So that may not help me just making it a required field. I have to think about that. I probably do, if I really wanted this to be intelligent, I would probably have to make sure that this was invisible until one of these was actually picked. And then when I go back on, I could actually have it there. I would make it visible then. So, in other words, after update, I would monitor to see is this not null, and then if it is, make the visible property for the subform yes. Otherwise, it would be no. That would work. I've actually done that on something else just recently. But again, the other thing I'd be really kind of worried about. Well, is it something to worry about? There was an error I thought could happen here. I think that would take care of it if I at least... Oh, it was, I thought maybe I should force them to select a service. But then again, maybe not, If I was building I don't have any records. I don't have any service records on this guy. Let's go to another one. Okay, they got, let's go to one that really has good service records. Wait, I didn't put more than one on her. Test client 2. Let's do 10. Maybe they just want personal property and put a couple records on here. Just make sure everything's working. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so what I'm thinking though is I was thinking maybe it'd be worthwhile for me to somehow not let them move out of here until they actually picked a service. But I could see where maybe they've got a client and they just hasn't decided what services to procure yet. So maybe we don't want to force them to have one checked here. But I think I would try to have something checked here. Otherwise you're going to get, well, not necessarily. I mean, maybe they just don't, maybe it's just a attorney that doesn't provide service yet, but they already have a client. I guess I could see that could happen. But it depends on what you're doing. You have to think about these things. Is it smart for them not to have a service check, to be able to have a record where a service isn't checked? Would it be smart to have a client where the client's not checked? It doesn't have a service that's checked. Could you have that situation? If the answer is yeah, then fine. Just do it the way I did it. Otherwise, you can put more information into your after update here and maybe into your on current on this that would test to see has something been picked, and if not, put an error message up there and leave them there until they actually pick it, just like we did when we did the the filter on the report. Have that kind of logic built into it. So anyway, these things get very, very sophisticated as you go along, and if you're doing this as part of your job, those are the kind of things you'll want to do. Now, I didn't ask you to do a lot of this in the class because I'm just trying to get you to understand the different parts of an information system. But if you really want to get good at mastering application development, and especially application development in databases and database systems like Access, these are the kind of things you have to do. You have to balance all the things that are going on in the state of your system at any given time and saying, what events are actually happening when I do things? And then those are the ones that would typically have to have that logic added to them in order to be able to constrain things, to keep things from happening, to allow things to happen, all that stuff. So this is it's a nice little example. It's something I think I could see people using a lot. But more importantly, I thought it was a really good demonstration of several ideas, again, that we talked about a little bit during class, but we never really saw actionable. This shows you how to actually do those things. So thanks a lot, and there may be more to come.